philosopher named Samuel Scheffler. He works out of NYU, and his big idea is that when it comes to the afterlife, most of us are asking the wrong question. He says that a lot of us ask the question that is on the front of my mind when I think about this: what's going to happen to me? Will I live on after death? Does something of me linger on in the world? Does it look or smell or sound like the accumulation of atoms we call Aaron? Do the people that I love live on in any meaningful way? For him, he's pretty agnostic about it and kind of comes down against a traditional afterlife. But his point is that the afterlife that might be the most important in forming our sense of meaning and purpose and values and identity isn't that we live on after death. It's that somebody does. His thought experiment is to ask, if you knew that 10 or 20 or 30 years after your death, some cataclysmic event would happen on earth and all life would go away, how would that change you? You would never experience it. You'd never know. But if after you were gone, shortly after you were gone, all human life was over, all institutions, all religions, all art, poetry, music, gone, what would give your life purpose and meaning? His claim is that far more important to most of us, without us knowing it, is the knowledge that someone will live after we do. Mostly people we don't know, don't love, and will never meet. But for him, the knowledge that at least humanity will continue is the reason why any of us cling to the idea of a particular religion or a nation state, why we build buildings or pave roads or go to museums or paint beautiful pieces of art or write poetry or music, why we have a family or plant a tree, is the idea that whatever happens to us after we die, someone will live. It's an interesting idea. His idea being, there is an afterlife. You just aren't in it. It's an interesting idea. I really hate preaching today while I'm grieving. A lot. You can't call in sick for this job. And so I'm thinking a lot today about what in us survives. And as much as I know it's all transient, that nothing's permanent, that the person you were 20, 30, 40 years ago is, for all intents and purposes, gone, and this is a person you have today, for as much as I know that all human institutions will eventually go away and life on the planet will, I know that the transience has its beauty. And any of you who have had to sit through more than one of my sermons knows that I draw a lot of theology and inspiration from stars and telescopes and the cosmos. I love the idea that science proves that we are recycled material. The atoms that make up your bones and blood were literally formed in the belly of a dying star billions of years ago, that pieces of you literally used to exist in different galaxies. You have traveled light years to get here. I love the notion that when my body goes back into the earth years from now, when it becomes soil, trees and plants will soak up the nutrients that make up my body, and I will once again be apple trees and animals, symphony orchestras and giraffes, dictators and saints, great beauty and horrific violence, art and trash will all be made out of what is now us. There's something really poignant about that transience to me, and yet I can't wrap my mind around the idea of not existing. I just can't do it. If Einstein was right, let's suppose he was. If Einstein was right and E equals mc squared, energy equals mass times the speed of light squared, then what that means is that you and I and anyone who's ever been made of matter is quite literally very slow, cold, pure energy. Condensed for but a moment, incarnate in flesh and bone. Beings made of pure energy who are here for just a bit. But I'm kind of attached to this version of that cold, pure energy. I don't want to die. To be honest with you, sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night thinking about it, and I'm a little scared. I don't want to go anywhere. I like this. It almost doesn't feel real. When Ralph Waldo Emerson's wife, Ellen, died, one of the things we do on that trip with the youth I was telling you about is go to the grave sites of our historical figures in the faith, and me being me, I make them kneel on the ground and touch the earth and imagine Emerson's spirit and atoms emanating from the ground below us. But I tell them a story of when his first wife, Ellen, died. She was 18 when they got married. This is in the early 1800s. And she had tuberculosis when they were married. Within 18 months, she had died. And in his journal, he writes to the year, 1 year to the day after she died, he writes a very important sentence. I went to Ellen's tomb today, and I opened her coffin. Here, this man known for his high-minded transcendentalism, the idea that there was an all-seeing, transcendent awareness infusing all of creation in us, this man of ideas, couldn't get his mind wrapped around his wife's death until he had seen with his own eyes, maybe felt with his hands, the reality of what it meant for her to not be alive, even a year after she died. As people who live in the United States, Westerners in this time and place, we are removed from the process of death and dying so often, and it does us a great disservice, in my opinion, in our theological and religious and moral lives. First and foremost, I think we are taught by America that death is a failure. I hear it in the language we use about when people die at the end of an illness that they lost their battle. Or when we keep people alive under insufferable conditions of pain because we can't imagine letting them go. How states in our own country make it illegal for people to choose the end of their life when they're in pain or to die with dignity, as that language goes. But the underlying moral and philosophical framework of that notion is that to die is a failure, maybe the ultimate failure. And that is a lie. To die is to do what all humans who have ever lived have done and will do. Also, in America and in the West, we sanitize what it means to age and get sick and die so much that when people get sick, we put them somewhere. And when people get old, we often put them somewhere. And when people die. The emerging hospice movement has been a blessing to people because we're able to see and be with the people that we care about in their final moments, not trying to keep them alive, but to keep them comfortable. We don't have, like some cultures do, cemeteries in our backyards or in our neighborhoods. We don't have burning grounds where people are cremated in our presence. All of that's a long way away, and you have to think real hard about going and then get in a car and spend some time, but it's all way over there. And it does us a great disservice. On the one hand, when death comes for people in our lives that are close to us, we're often surprised. We only practice death and dying when it's someone who's truly close to us. And it ends up feeling like a shock. We are lucky enough in our jobs to get the great honor and privilege of being with people when they die. It is one of the proudest moments I ever get to have as a minister. One of the best parts of my job, in an odd way. Just this week, I got to be in a room with a member of our church as she was dying in the midst of hospice care. And the week before that, had the chance to memorialize the brother of a member of our church. And the week before that, I held the ash and bone of a woman I loved in my hands. And we scattered what remained of her body into the earth out in the garden. What an honor. The Zen teacher, Roshi Joan Halifax, talks about the spiritual discipline of being with death, like meditating or praying, being with death as a discipline. She's at the forefront of some of the most radical elements of the hospice movement, so much that people who are in her hospice centers practice dying. She engages them in the mental processes that happens when you die, and she sometimes literally crawls into bed with people who have no one else. And when they're very close, wraps her arms around them and breathes in sync with their breath in and out until there's only one person breathing. How beautiful. And how rare and radical in a culture that wants us to put all of that somewhere else. Dying people have taught me so much. First and foremost, in my experience, the majority of people who are dying are the least afraid person in the room. Not always, but most of the time, they take on a role of comforting somebody else. And I'll take their word for it. When people die, we watch them ask mainly for two things: the presence of people that they love surrounding them, and beauty. Music that they love. The windows open so that they can feel the breeze or hear birds singing. The sunlight shining in or a piece of art, but people that they love and beauty come up over and over again. And if anything, working with dying people has taught me about the fragility of life. It's not a cliche. Sometimes you're here on Monday and not on Tuesday. Even if you do live a long life, it's still really short. Like I said, I don't want to preach today because I'm grieving myself and because I would rather scrap this whole thing. It's not put together very well, and I don't like doing this in front of everybody. Not a bit. This week teaches me a lot. Thursday, I got a call letting me know that my good friend and my mentor, Scotty, had died. And she was like my church mom. Like I said with the children's story, she was the first person at the door of a Unitarian church when I got there. And she handed me an order of service and welcomed me and never let me leave after that. She told me that if it was during their pledge drive, she told me that I couldn't make a college student pledge. I had to make a real pledge. And she said, this is how this whole thing works. And then she bought books for me on Unitarian history and made me do homework. And she made me stay after church the first couple of times and clean dishes because she told me that in church, people don't wash your dishes for you. I'll repeat that. in church, people don't wash your dishes for you. And then she said I had to stay for the adult education class because it's not a movie. And you don't just sit down and then leave when it's over. You have to meet people because that's what churches are. And then she told me we're a lay-led congregation. We don't have a minister, so when are you going to preach? There's this phrase that some of the early Christians used called salted with fire. Basically, it's the idea of a person who is on fire. And that's what she said about me. She asked me to go to seminary, and she said all the time that she was really proud. And then I got to be there when she was ordained. I can only remember almost one sermon anybody's ever given, myself included, and it was hers, the week that her mom died. And I just remember that she said that she was terribly sad, but that there was nothing to be afraid about. That we didn't know what happened, but that it happens to everybody, and that there's nothing bad on the other side. And then she said what she always said to me, quoting a saint, "All shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well." So here I am, living in her afterlife, in a world that she and others helped create for me and you. And I have no idea what happens after you die. I have no clue. And my opinion on the matter changes week to week. But I do know that today I feel a tremendous aching in my heart. And that aching is evidence of a person's pure, loving impact on my life. And so if you feel an aching for someone whose face is up here or was on the screens or someone who you brought in, if you feel that sting and that ache, it is evidence in your body that you leave an impact when you leave. That someone will feel that ache when you are gone and that your life matters very much. The surest way I know to honor the people who have come before us, the people in whose afterlife we are living, is to take what they've given us and make it a blessing. To not waste a minute of it because it's precious and short and fragile, and some days they call you on Tuesday and they're gone on Thursday. And so if we are to honor the people in our lives who have meant so much, take what you've been given and make it a blessing and live well, and don't waste anything, and love people furiously. And don't be afraid to feel grief and awe and wonder, and it's not shameful to be sad or in a childlike state of wonder. It's being alive. Be kind to everyone, because it's not worth not being that way. Do something good and loving with your life and make an afterlife worth living in for somebody else. For all we've loved and lost, we give thanks today. Amen.